Hey everyone, it's Tim from Linessa Farms Specialty and Heirloom Livestock. Thanks for joining us again today. So today we are headed out to Central Illinois. We are going to be visiting with Mr. Elton Mau. Elton has been raising sheep pretty much his whole life, and he is running rotational grazing operations in Central Illinois right now with wool sheep. So he's going to be a little bit different than some of the operations that you may be familiar with. The other great thing about visiting with Elton is he has all kinds of cool cutting edge ideas that he is doing right now, especially when it comes to the crops and the forage that he is using. He is doing things like planting seed via airplane over existing commercial crops. All kinds of cool ideas, all kinds of cool stuff that you have probably never even heard of before. So regardless if you're raising sheep, goats, cattle, or anything else, you are going to want to check this out. Tim from Linessa Farms Specialty and Heirloom Livestock. Thanks for joining us again today. So today we are in Illinois with Elton Mau. All right, so Elton, thanks for having us.
No problem.
Tell me, where the heck are we?
We're in the center part of Illinois by Bloomington, Illinois. We're east of Bloomington, 16 miles.
You're in a really good location for people to get to you if they're coming from west, east,
north, south.
North or south. You've
Right.
got what is it, 50? Is it 57 that's just out here?
Well, 57's over to the east, but 55 runs through Bloomington, 39, 74.
So this is
it's
really
easy to get to.
It's easy to get to. So give us an overview of the farm. How many acres are we on here that we run the sheep on, and how many sheep do we have?
I started out with just a farmstead. There's 8 acres. It was cut out of an 80 acres. And that's what I started with. And then 10 years later, they decided to sell the rest of the 80, so I bought it. So I've got 80 acres here, and then I've got 3 different farmettes that I take my sheep to in the summertime, and that's about 20 acres. I've got today 130 head of sheep here, and usually I end up with a 200% lamb crop. So
right, so that jumps quick.
Oh, yeah, now all of a sudden we're up to 300.
And what primary breed do you have here? Would you say it's primarily Polled Dorset and then crosses off of the Polled Dorset?
Yeah, it's a Polled Dorset with a Barula gene in them. Nice picture there.
Yeah.
They're a commercial sheep. They are not a show sheep. They're short-legged, meaty. They're crossed with an Ile-de-France ram so that they have more muscle.
We've been to a lot of places, we've talked to a lot of people, and Polled Dorset shows up on a lot of farms. Even if they're not necessarily breeding that breed, they use them for surrogates, they use them. What is it about the Polled Dorset that people like so darn much?
Good mothers, good milkers. They're nice sheep. They got a good attitude, clean face and legs.
I advise a lot of people that are getting started, if they want to go with a wool breed, I say, well, it's tough to beat a Polled Dorset to start off with. They're kind of a happy medium of everything. Would you think that's a fair?
Yep.
Now, your background in sheep, tell me about that. You've been around sheep your whole life pretty much since you were a kid?
Yeah. It was a 4-H project that went wild.
That is not the first time we've heard that before. We went to a guy's farm that had a couple hundred, and I said, how did this happen? He said, I went to buy a rabbit. And,
oh my!
yeah, I went to buy a rabbit, and the guy that was selling the rabbits had sheep, and next thing you know, they're addictive. They're like potato chips, you know.
You can't have just one.
No, and you shouldn't. Boy, for raising livestock, they're a fun animal to raise.
There's something that you can handle that won't kill you. I mean, you know, you get into cows and horses and stuff, and you know, you do have a problem with that. But yeah, there's something that the kids can handle. The adults can handle. It doesn't cost you a whole lot. If one of them happens to die, it's a couple $100, but still, it's not like a cow that's in the thousands. So.
Right. I think there's something to be said for mental health of having livestock as well.
Oh my!
It gives me something to get up and do. You can see the results. You know, you're responsible for them, and if they fail, generally it's because you fail them.
Right.
So you have some maps that you want to show us that kind of show us an overview of the farm that'll kind of give everybody a little bit better idea of what we're looking at here. Yeah. So if you don't mind, we'll head into the house and take a look at that.
Sounds good. Let's go.
This is kind of an bird's eye view of the property itself where we're at right now.
Yes.
So we're here.
And this is from the NRCS, the USDA local office. They come out and then they they did the red lines. Now this is what I started off with, is only eight acres. They just basically cut the farmstead out of the 80 acres. And then 10 years later, they decided to sell the rest of the 80, and then I bought it.
Gotcha.
So it's a step-by-step process. That's the original farm when the other guy had it.
How old is the farm?
Pretty old.
Okay.
It's old. It used to be either all corn or all beans, so that gives you an idea with my farmstead cut out what it used to look like.
So you basically turned tillable ground into pasture.
Yep. I
Okay.
took flat, black McLean County ground that grows corn and beans, and I still grow corn and beans. Any one year, we'll just say this is corn, this is beans, this is wheat, then this will be an annual.
Okay.
This is permanent fescue, and then we'll just start back around. So I'm on a 4-year rotation. If this is corn the first year, then this will be corn the next year. I drew out the blank map, and then I just kind of fill it in. And then as far as how big should something be, well, that depends upon your time of year and how many heads you've got. They're all 15 acres, okay? This time I only divided it into 4 pieces, and then this one was growing a crop. Then this was in the wintertime, November, December, and I had ram lambs and ewe lambs, so I took a net fence from here to here and made a lot, and then divided it in half. So from here on over is the ewe lambs, from here on over is the ram lambs. And you just go on down the line. So the answer to the question is, it all depends.
Yeah, and we talk to people about that a lot. You know, so many factors go into it. Now, are you using the Premier
Electronet?
Electronet, that's what we use as well. I really like it. Plus, it gives you that flexibility to where if you need to change the size of the paddock, you can easily change it. Change the number of animals that you have. You can, I mean, just lots and lots of stuff. Now, are you using, is it a double spike step-ins, or are you using drivable, or what are you using?
Just
the single spike?
Regular Electronet with the single spike, and I drive them in. I've got certain ways of even getting them out of frozen ground.
Yeah, we found
flat bar and a vice grips.
Yep.
Works real good. If you give it a little bit of a twist, it'll pop right out.
What kind of charger are you using? Are you on AC power? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
I've got 2, I call them farmettes. This one's 10 miles away, another one's 2 miles and 2 miles. And I use electricity there because I want to make sure that it's good and hot. 5 to 7,000 volts. We got to keep the sheep in and the coyotes out.
Absolutely.
This is one of the farms that I go to. 10-acre farm. It was a cattle farm. These are all cattle barns. So I just come in and I just put this in. And then I put this one in. And then the next year, if I started this way one year, I'll start this way the next year.
So do you utilize the crops that you grow for feed for your animals?
Yes. What I do for the cornfield, I'll fly cereal rye, oats, and turnips over the standing corn in August. Try to coordinate it with a rain. Sometimes that doesn't happen like this year. Sometimes management forgets. One time I was going somewhere, the wife was driving, and I'm like, oh shoot, I didn't fly stuff on. So I called the operation and they flew it on, and in a few days we combined the corn. It worked out perfect because all that husks and stuff went right on top of the seed. Got a good germination.
So for people that aren't following what we're talking about, you literally mean fly. So you're having a plane that flies over with seed. They drop the seed over top of the corn, and it gets down into the ground. And like you said, they went in to combine it. They lay down, essentially it gets bedding over top of it that allows it to germinate. And then how much time transpires between harvest and when the animals can actually get out onto it and start eating on it?
Every year's different.
What was it last year?
Last year I had two fields of beans. I flew cereal rye over a bean field a few years ago, and I got the neighbor across the section as a tenant farmer, and he comes in and he combines it. That cereal rye grew up about that tall, and he had to go about a half a mile an hour to combine the beans. Lesson learned, don't do that. I mean, it works great if it's corn because the snouts go right through and the grass grows right through the snout.
Tell me again, what are you planting over the corn?
It'd be cereal rye and oats and turnips.
Okay.
And there's 3 different kinds of turnips you can plant.
Now, are the animals actually digging down and getting into the turnip, or are they just eating the green off the top?
Both.
Okay.
They'll do both. Depends upon the stage of the turnip and stuff, but they'll eat down into the dirt that far. They'll eat dandelions down in the dirt that far. So, I mean, there's something there that us humans don't know about. The animals do, so let the animals decide.
Is it cost advantageous? Does it work out to overseed like that by air?
It works for me. I'll say 80 to 90% of the years I get a good take. I'm looking for green growing plant in the soil 365 days out of the year if I can. And I'm not just looking for 1 year. That cereal rye in that standing corn, I can feed it in the fall time, and then I come back in the springtime before we plant soybeans in there and feed it again. Or you can make hay off of it. It's no-till, so we'll spray it and plant the soybeans in there, and then after the soybeans come off, then I'll put in wheat. And then after the wheat comes off the next year, about, we'll say July 4th, I'll plant in like an 8-way cover crop mix, which has got your cereal rye, your clovers, your turnips, plantain, chicory, which are anthemitics for sheep. And they got a real deep taproot, and they pull up minerals from down below. And then that will feed the lamb crop in the fall time, and then that carries over into the next year, and that's where I lamb. There's always something growing out here. So that's why I wanted to show you this, because we're going to cover all kinds of stuff growing. Obviously, it's what is today, the 25th of February, but there's still stuff out there growing.
So for a cold climate, sometimes people think, in a cold climate, you've got dead periods of the year where nothing can grow, and that's not necessarily the case. You just have to do your homework, find out what works and what doesn't.
Exactly. And plant accordingly. And it's not 100% guarantee.
Right.
I mean, if you don't get rain, right. And we didn't this year. I call this a slow drought that we're in. Every so often, Google pops up a picture and they'll say, look at your picture from a year ago or 2 years ago. So I'm sitting there, I'm looking at that, and I'm like, oh my gosh. My cover crops at that point, they should have been like knee high to crotch high. They were just barely to the top of my boot. Light bulb come on, it's like, I got to get rid of some livestock. I don't have any feed out there. Yeah, it depends upon the class of livestock, the time of the year. You can start with the 15-acre field, which makes for spreading fertilizer and planting real easy. And then by using the net fences, you can divide it. And like right here, this is it's 164 foot one way by almost 164. This is just a little bitty square. You take all them fences out, and then all of a sudden you got a quarter of a mile, really. I
think it's nice for people to actually draw things out and to put things on paper that they can look at. Sometimes it's easier to wrap your head around than walking out in the fields and turning in circles.
And you can sit in the house and figure up like your fencing needs or your feed needs. You've got X amount of sheep. They weigh about so much. How much do they need? I've got a rising plate meter and pasture sticks and stuff, and you can figure all that. And then to make things even more complicated, I started grazing some cattle. I started with a dairy steer, and then I got 2 steers from Greg Judy, and then I got another 2 steers, so I've had 5 of them so far. I've tried 3 wires. Mm-hmm. Greg Judy keeps his sheep and cattle in with 1 wire at 10 inches, the top of your work boot. And I went down there. I was talking to Greg, and I says, baloney, you can't do that. He says, Elton, come on down. I'm looking around. I'm like, darn, it does work. But, you got to keep feed in front of them. They got to be trained to it.
Yeah, it's not so easy. It's not as easy as just throwing up a wire 10 inches off the ground.
No.
There's a lot of backside work to that people don't see.
Right. And even with the electronet, and I've got Dorsets, but they'll go through that electronet.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it must be something about the Dorsets, but they'll hit that electronet, they'll tuck and roll and go right over it.
We've seen it ourselves.
Nothing you can do except, okay, well, let's go get the sheep back in.
Yes.
Yes. For common people that may not know the difference, they may look at an Ile-de-France and a pulled Dorset and not be able to tell the difference. What are the key characteristics that differentiate between an Ile-de-France and a pulled Dorset? Is it strictly size, or is it more than that? When I look at an Ile-de-France, they just seem to be a little thicker too. You know what they remind me of? They remind me of the old Dorsets. When I was a kid, the traditional pulled Dorsets that like a Hunter Dorset. You go to yes. Jeff's, you look at his, and you're like, that's a pulled Dorset. Yeah. Right, and then as they've gotten more showy, they've gotten taller, longer. They've got some Columbia and some other things in there.
Oh, surely not.
Oh yeah. But when I look at the Ile-de-France, it was one of those things that I liked about them. I'm like, that looks like a traditional pulled Dorset to me, but maybe even a little bigger.
Right. Now, these are purebred Dorsets from Stan Rader. So they'll have more leg to them, more length to them.
Right.
We go over there in this other flock. I have a Dorset Ram. Ile-de-France, they're shorter in the legs. You can set a meat platter on their backs.
Right.
They're that wide.
Right.
They got meat. They're not the showy, long, tall.
These are nice to look at. They're just prettier.
Yeah. Here, let's walk over.
Sure.
That one bunch is baleage. I just dropped it off last night.
Okay. It's a nice looking lamb. Got a lot of length to it.
That's a yearling there. Actually, she's a 2-year-old. Yeah, she should come right up to you. She's a show sheep. Yeah, and that's the ewe lamb.
They walk nice. They got a more athletic look to them. Nice long body length. So you got some baleage you dropped in.
Yeah, this is the very center of the bale. There's some red clover in there.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it looks good.
Ah, I love that smell.
This spring, when it was ready to bale, either we got a rain that day or the guy was busy. And so it took about 3 weeks, and finally he says, hey, I can be at your place this morning. I says, let's do it.
Right.
So basically we made hay in a day. We started at 11 a.m. and we were done by 11:30 p.m. I had 61 bales. It was cut, tethered, baled, wrapped, hauled, and wrapped. And I was tired.
Yes. Yes. So this looks good. You know, sometimes you've got to watch for individuals that don't know. You'll get into these bales and you'll see if it got to oxygen, it'll get a black, slimy, nasty kind of stuff. And it's not uncommon to see some of that when you look at this. It's going to happen. You're going to get little spots. You just do your best to go through and pull the spots off. But this is nice, and it's got that beautiful smell. To me, it smells like pipe tobacco to me, or tobacco.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And if for people that have never smelled it, I love it. Some people smell it and they don't like it. I love it.
Yeah.
It just has that pipe tobacco smell to me, and they'll just gobble it up.
Yeah. Here's your Timothy, and then this is your grass, and obviously it's pretty mature.
Right.
And that's why I had to explain to you that, you know, we were really about 2-3 weeks behind getting it baled, but it was one of them situations where you had a good day and then you had rain. Then you had 2 good days getting ready to bale, and it rains again.
Sure. And you can see the other advantage of wet wrapping is, you see how you got all this leaf in here? A lot of times with dry baling, what will happen is as we ted it and as we work it before we bale it, you'll actually lose, these leaves will dry and kind of chaff off, and you'll lose a lot of that in the baleage. That's a lot of nutrition, a lot of good protein. So there's a lot of advantage. We're seeing less and less people dry bale and more people wet wrap. It's faster, you know, you can control it more. It's just learning how to work it in a feeding rotation, especially when you've only got a couple animals. It can be tough.
Yes.
We interviewed a guy last week. Well, he's got a couple hundred head, so when he rolls his out, he knows it's gone in a day.
Right.
Well, that's perfect. So for someone like me, you know, I'm running 30-40 head on a paddock. I gotta rearrange things so it works out. But
yeah, this one's even eating for us.
Yeah.
You will notice as we walk around that my sheep are pretty calm and tame. That's because I'm out here every day. Always let the owner touch the fence first.
yes,
There you go.
I've shocked myself a few times, haven't I, Lindy?
I always wanted to have a farm to raise my kids on, so I had a business card made up, great big red letters across the middle. It said, wanted farm to raise my kids on. And, whoa, let's let these two get back together here. They're ewe lambs. There we go. Everybody's fine now. And so the wife was driving down the road one day and seen this place for sale. And that's how we ended up with it.
So what are we looking at here?
I have 4 different rams. I've got one of Rick Schropp's. I've got that Dorset, and then I've got 2 Ile-de-France rams. I keep track of who's the dad of the lambs and then try to breed them to a different ram. So I've got 3 breeding groups here.
So when we see the marking on the sheep, what is that marking telling us?
When I decided which ram went with which group, I gave it a color, that's all. So in the unfortunate instance that they get out and mixed up,
You know
I don't have to look at ear tags.
Okay.
I combined the 2 groups up north because after a month of breeding, that's 2 cycles, 17 days times 2, said that's good enough. And what I'm gonna do is I've got ewe lambs in here with old ewes, and I'm gonna run all these groups through the barn and separate off the ewe lambs, put the ewe lambs in this area here, and probably feed them some soy hull pellets, because there's some that are pretty small. They're twins and triplets. You know, I got about 10 to 15% of my crop is singles. The rest are twins, and I got some triplets, and I've had some quads.
So these are on pasture all the time, no barn?
Correct.
And they lamb out on pasture. So when we have these conversations, here's what happens. Here's been my experience. People watch videos online of people free-ranging their sheep. They go out, they buy themselves some sheep, and they throw them out on pasture, and they all die. And there's times where people say, oh, well, if you're going to free-range them out on pasture, they got to be hair sheep. And here up in our environment where it's this cold and we get snow and ice and everything else, you're not going to get by with that with hair sheep, are you? They're going to turn into little sheep popsicles.
They got hair sheep up in Minnesota.
I wonder when I see our friends out at like Helly Ranch and stuff where they've got their sheep that are popping up in the morning out of 3 foot of snow. I'm wondering, I guess it's a situation where you got to look at it and say, okay, what is this like and what's going to work?
Okay, that you right there where the wool's broke over her back and you can almost see her skin. She got her head turned that way.
Yeah.
That's one you would not want up in that snowy area. You want one with a closed fleece like that ram over there.
And how do they tolerate the cold temperatures for you?
They do fine, so long as they've got wool on them, okay?
Right.
You got to put everything in context. One time, 15 years ago, I had one sheep got a fever in, I don't know, we'll say September. So she lost her wool. So now we're into February, and we had one of them winters like what you were just talking about. We had 2-3 foot of snow, and she froze to death.
Okay.
Because she didn't have enough wool. She only had about that much wool. And when I cut her open, I posted her myself. She had a full rumen. She was eating as much as she could, and you know, that makes heat, but she just didn't have that 3 inches of wool to keep her warm. Even cows, you know, they'll grow hair in the wintertime. And you take a show steer or something, you just can't throw them out in January outside. You know, they'll freeze to death.
When you're looking at the lambs that are born off of these mothers that have been in cold temperatures and exposed to cold temperatures throughout gestation, the lambs will kind of adjust to survive that. Will they not? Will they not?
If you are going to lamb out on pasture, you have to lamb when the grass is green. I have lambed in January and February, and that didn't work.
So you're telling
unless you know, like Rick, if you're going to lamb in a barn, and he's got those hoop barns, and I love those hoop barns.
Right, I do too.
But if you're going to lamb out on pasture, you got to be a whole lot smarter, and you got to look at when the deer have their young, the coyotes, you know.
So you're timing yours to lamb when? What's your target?
End of May.
End of May.
Beginning of June, when the grass is green and the birds are singing.
So how does that affect you as far as sales are concerned? You know, when I was a kid, it was all about hitting the Easter market.
Yeah, yeah.
If you're going to hit the show, you got to have them. You got to have them earlier. If you're going to hit Easter, you got to have them earlier.
I'm trying to do this to improve the soil, improve the forage, do it economically. There's lots of balls up in the air that I'm trying to balance all at the same time.
What are you doing for mineral for your animals that are out on pasture?
I've got a mix from, it's a pre-mix from Premier. It's their gold formula, and it mixes with white salt. And I've got a mortar mixer, and I just pour it in there and mix it up, and I mix up a whole bunch at a time, and then I store it in the barn, bring it out.
And this is your mineral feeder over here?
Yeah, that's one of the mineral feeders over there.
Okay.
I don't know, you want to walk over and take a look at it? You'll see some green grass in here.
Yeah, I see some poking through.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had some warm days.
But, I mean, you know, my gosh, it was 30 degrees this morning, but it's going to be 50 in a couple of days, so this is not a regular February.
So for people that haven't seen these mineral feeders before, they've actually got a wind vane on the top of them that helps keep them turned away from the driving wind, correct?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, if you stand here, you can see the turbine over there. That tells you which direction the wind's coming from.
And you can see how this is directly in line with it. Absolutely.
And then mineral that is loose, it's not a block, so that the sheep don't wear their teeth down.
Yeah, and that's another thing that we talk to people about with the mineral blocks with sheep and goats is sheep and goats like to chew, and they'll crack their teeth right off if you're not careful. Are you doing any grain or any kind of supplementation with your animals that are out on pasture? Is there a time of the year that you'll do that?
When I run them through the chutes, I always body score them, and then I've got that in my records. It always seems like there's about 10% that'll be in the 2.5 to 2 body score out of 5.
Right.
And I'm going to have them preg checked. Usually I have Purdue do it, Gerald Kelly. I'm going to give the U of I a chance and let them do it. And I'll look at my records, and if I've got a ewe that's a 2 to 2.5, and she's got like 2 or 3 fetuses inside of her. She's on the list to go get a little bit extra. So what I'll do is this group of ewe lambs that are going to be in here, if I've got some of them old ewes that are like that, I'll throw them in here, and then they'll get, I don't know, maybe a pound of soy hull pellets per head per day. And I'll design something over here with the net fences, and I've got some of those black porta-troughs from Premier, and I'll feed them out of that. The rest of them, if they got a single and they can't handle it, they're down the road.
What are your thoughts about preg checking? Obviously, you do it. What are some of the benefits for people that may not be familiar with what we're talking about, or maybe you're thinking about getting started? When we talk about preg checking, we're talking about a veterinarian or a trained individual. You want to get somebody that knows what they're doing, because they will mess you up.
Yep.
They're going to come out with an ultrasound. They're going to check that ewe. They're going to tell you if they're bred or if they're open. When we use the term open, we just mean that they're not bred. They're going to, if they catch them at the right time, it's timing too. They can tell you how many fetuses they're carrying as well, correct?
And how old they are.
So tell us about the benefits of preg checking, and what is the time window that they tell you is the best time to check them in the gestation period?
There's a big window for preg checking and a smaller window for the time to really be able to count the fetuses and be able to tell how old they are.
Right.
And there again, it's by guess and by golly, it's the eye of the beholder. That's why you got to have somebody that really knows what they're doing.
Absolutely.
And Gerald's really good at it. He's within about a week.
And we've seen some individuals, we went through a phase, I noticed maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, at least in our area, where we had individuals that went out and bought themselves an ultrasound and decided they were gonna preg check sheep.
Oh,
and boy, our phone was blowing up, and they're like, this guy or this gal preg checked my sheep, and they were off by a month. And the other thing is, it's hitting the window correctly. As you said, preg checking's not, you got a bigger window. You can't do them too early, or you can't tell exactly what you're looking at. And then if you do it too late, they're too big, and then you're trying to count animals that are wrapped up around each other. So like you said, I'm a big fan of the pipestone wheel. Mm-hmm. We have an online program that's similar to that, where somebody can just plop in a date and it'll punch out the numbers that they need. Mm-hmm. But there is definitely a window.
Yeah.
So the advantage of having them preg checked.
For my operation here, it really gets back to management. I mean, it's back to the shepherd. It's back to the boss. You got to be the boss. I know when I put my ram in. Some guys, they just leave the ram in for all year long. I know when the ram went in, so I can count so many days, and then I get them preg checked. So when I'm out here in May and June, and I've got, say, 3 ewes that have lambed, and I got 6 lambs, and they're all clustered together as close as all 3 of us at mineral feeder are. And you got lambs all over the place and 3 ewes claiming everybody's. You tell me which one gets the single and which one gets the triplet. So I look at the records and I say, okay, so that number there should have a single, and you just kind of stand back and you watch. You use this thing especially.
Yeah.
Or the dog, a good dog will hold them ewes next to those lambs. Then you can snatch them. Sometimes it's by guess and by golly. Sometimes you kind of match them together and, well, that didn't work, so we'll try something different. You run them through the chutes. You got a body score on them. You got an idea on when they're going to lamb, and you got an idea on how many it's going to lamb, and you can make management decisions on whether you need to cut those ewes off and give them more feed, like your previous question, mm-hmm. or, you're out here and it's just a real cluster. Right. on this one day, a whole bunch decided to lamb all at the same time, and you got lambs running all over the place. Sure. It's not like in a barn, but you can have this in a barn. You can have 2 or 3 ewes in a barn up in a corner, and you're like, now who goes with who?
Oh, it happens.
And so that's when I look at my records and I say, okay, well, then we'll kind of divide it up like this. And that's why I use it. Management. We had a Christmas
morning about 4 or 5 years ago now, and went out to the barn.
Of course,
and
Christmas.
And it was just babies everywhere, and we're like, you're going with her, and you're going with her, and you're going with her, and everybody's happy, and and sometimes you look at the babies about a month later, and you're like, yeah, you probably went with a different one. But so when I see triplets and quads, especially quads, I'm like, oh no. Like, I'm not a fan of the quads. But as far as triplets, do you have some moms that can handle triplets? Mm-hmm. And again, that's knowing which ones to keep and which ones to cull, right?
Yep. Rick had he bought some of my sheep, and one of the ones that he bought from me had 6. Yeah, he was carrying a bottle around all the time, flopping a bottle in their mouth, and kept them all. I mean, just having them doesn't count.
How important is genetics when it comes to having multiples?
Extremely.
It's the defining.
Because these sheep have the Barula gene in them.
Tell us about the Barula gene. Most people
don't know anything about
Barula gene.
Barula gene was a gene that was found in Australia in the Barula merinos, and it's kind of like GMO corn. Through breeding and stuff, they were able to transfer this gene into other types of sheep, other breeds of sheep. Obviously, you've got to have a sheep that's got the milking capacity to support the lambs. I used to have Rambouillets, and they'd have a itty bitty udder.
Right.
Now these Dorsets, they got an udder like a basketball, and they can support 2 and 3 lambs.
So you could get yourself in a trick bag pretty quick, fiddling with genetics on a breed that may not be able to handle it.
Right. I've been looking for that thing.
This is just like our house, Lenny.
How about that? You ever see that?
Yeah.
How about that?
Sometimes our field just sprouts tools. What ends up happening is we're out in the summertime when the grass is this deep and we're doing stuff, and you set it down and turn around twice and it's gone.
And it was red, and I yelled at the hired hand at the time. I says, "How in the world could we lose a red-handled hammer?" Yeah. Now there's a flat bar out here too somewhere.
Somewhere you'll find it. Hopefully not with a piece of equipment. Excellent. Just in case our viewers were wondering, today's episode is brought to you by Craftsman Red Hammers.
We're standing right here on the ridge. So if that's looking north, you can, if it wasn't hazy, you could see 5-6 miles.
Oh yeah.
To the north. And then you turn around and you look south, and you could see Kreider's place from here if you knew what you were looking for. And they're about 6 miles to the south.
Okay.
So I'm right on top of the ridge. This is a view of what I showed you on the table there.
Yeah.
This is a new idea that I came up with. I've got one place that's got a concrete feeding floor, so I had to figure out a way of putting my net fence across the concrete. And then after about 3 years, the light bulb came on, and I'm like, hey, I can use that for frozen ground.
Oh, look at this.
So we can move it without having to pull the posts out of the...
Genius.
Yeah.
Yep, you just drill a hole in it, huh?
It's just an old used tire.
There it is, Lindy. There's one of our, didn't think of that before. Every time we go to a farm, it never fails. We see something that we're like, I didn't think of that.
And then put a hole in the bottom so you can drain the water out.
Yeah, look at that.
The best one that I found, and I don't have one right close here, is you go to a motorcycle place and get their motorcycle tires that are not real tall. So they're a tire that's lighter and bigger in diameter.
Sure.
And therefore they don't blow over as easy.
So these are your Great Pyrenees?
That's 2 of them, yep. That's the male in the front, the female in the back. Go ahead, that's Lucy. The other's Max. And then that's their puppy over there. Believe it or not.
And you've actually got an alleyway built here to run your animals through when you're moving them?
No, that's what I call my no man's land. You can look left and right. That was because I had one group of sheep on this side and another group on that side.
Okay.
And that works out real well when you've got rams and ewes and you don't want them together.
Ah, so you got that.
Separation. If you just have one net fence, they'll get their nose up here close, and she'll get her nose up close, and pretty soon he'll be over there. But if you've got something, usually from your fingertips to your shoulder width-wise, and then there's an electric aluminum wire right there.
Max is coming.
Yeah, one out of them. The sheep that's got the fangs. Can you just imagine what a coyote thinks?
Yes.
Holy smokes, that thing's got fangs. Strangest looking sheep I ever seen in my life.
And at what time are you docking tails?
When they lamb. There again, and if you got a picture of this field, it gives everybody an idea. I don't let them run the whole field. They'll have like 164 foot, one net fence deep for where they would be lambing today. And then in 2 days, I'll move them. When they lamb, I'll catch the old lady, I'll feel her, check her udder, feel her for body condition score, make sure everything's okay, put a number on her, a paint number on her, and let her go. And then I'll grab the lambs, and I've got a four-wheeler, and I put 2 garbage cans on the back, and I put the lambs in the garbage cans to hold the lambs while I'm processing them. I'll weigh them, I'll put an ear tag in them, and I'll put a band on their tail. Put a paint number on it that coincides with the U, so that when I'm out here, I can put the 2 of them together.
Gotcha. Do you mark any lambs any way you can differentiate between male and female?
No,
Okay.
I mark according to 1s, 2s, and 3s.
Okay.
I've got 3 colors. Red like in stop, that's bad. That's a single. Blue is 2 because it rhymes. And 3, well, that's for triplets because those are money makers.
Right.
Now, what do you do 4? Well, that's a green number with a red line. And if you got more than that, okay, say we got 3, 4, and we got 5, we use a green number and a blue line. That's 5. So I can be out here driving around and I'll see an old lady with a certain color, and then if she doesn't have that colored lamb with her, you start looking around. And, you know, if she's supposed to have 3 and she's only got 1, we got a problem. If she's got 2, that's not too bad. If she's got 3, she's gold.
Do you have a window of time with your ewes and lambs to where, age-wise with the lambs, where if they make it past this, it's kind of like, you know, they're good to go? Do you have a danger zone where you really got to watch them close?
First 5 days.
And if you see something go wrong, what's it usually going to be?
Hypothermia.
And what would be a sign and symptom of hypothermia?
They're dead.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hunched back is a big red flag. By the time they're shivering, boy, you're about dead. Skinny, pick them lambs up. They should have a fat belly. It should kind of squish out a little bit when you pick them up. If he ain't got a fat belly, he ain't getting enough to eat.
So then if you find a problem child, do you immediately find the mom and check her out and say, okay, what's going on? Check in the bag, things like that. Okay. Makes sense, right?
Yep.
Go to the source of the problem, which 90% of the time is going to be the mom.
For that problem, these hay racks here, they're out here for windbreak today. In May and June, they're out here for windbreak, and then also I can pen that problem ewe and those lambs up. I've got hog panels on the sides, so then you can throw up a lambing jug quickly. There are mobile shelters, a sun rack, sunshades, waterers. There's a lot of things. I use only high quality stuff here.
Right.
You can lay it down, you can stand it straight up. This is a cattle panel, but hog panels work better. And then you can come off of it with a couple of gates and make yourself some place to put the ewe and lambs if you have to, because you don't want to crawl up underneath the hay rack. So that's right. Now, this is made for the summertime. This will come up straight across, and it will be my sunshade. And the blocks are to hold it down because it is so windy out here that this will be flying up in the air in the wintertime.
And I see we've got our dog buffet over here, right?
Oh, yes. This means they've been sliding across on their bellies. This is adjustable for lambs and stuff. You want to make it lower. You find yourself a dog house. And here's a couple of tricks I did. These are hooks off of your tarp strap. And I used to have a tarp strap here, but them puppies love to chew on them. So I had to come up with a different idea. So I use a chain. They can't mess with that. Go to Menards, get yourself a piece of roofing tin. But you got to be able to get into it to clean out the dog dish or whatever. This is a piece of 5 foot long, 3-inch diameter PVC.
Right. And then you can just pop the lid right off the top, put your food down in there.
Got to have a lid. Put a rope on it so it doesn't get lost. Fill her here, close her back up. It's an automatic dog feeder.
Nice.
And I got 3 of them out here, so they go through, each one of these is 5 foot, that's 60 inches. Yesterday they had already went through 60 inches in 1 day.
Oh boy.
Yeah, that's
a lot.
And as you can see, we have to feed the wildlife, the birds.
Yes. Yeah.
There's no way around that. Then you just be careful you don't get smacked. But yeah, that's an idea I come up with.
What do we have coming up here on this pasture?
Okay, what you see here would be cereal rye. This was what was left over from my 8-way mix this fall.
So this was planted last fall?
Would have been planted after wheat. In fact, that's what you've got here. This is wheat stubble. And then we just drilled this stuff in. There's some clover right there. There might be some turnips, but they probably got frozen out. It's been a pretty mild winter, so I'm expecting to see turnips come back up through here.
Now with the turnips, they'll eat the green off the top. Will they also root them out of the ground and eat them?
Yes.
Very nutritional for the animals.
Oh my, yes. And there's one variety of turnips that put up a lot of top green growth, and then there's a second kind that makes that big bulb, and then there's a third kind that's a combination of the two.
Now over here, is it the same? We got the same thing coming up?
That was a soybean field that we planted cereal rye into, and that was drilled in. Same guy, same drill, different times. This 8-way mix was end of July, and this stuff was after we combined the beans. So, and then here again, you can see the real erosion, but
that's just heavy rain in a short period of time there, isn't it?
Exactly. But you got a hill off to the left side of the picture, and it's going down, and if you pan out to the north there, you can see where it eventually goes out to my corner. The whole idea is to keep it covered so that it slows that stuff down. Here's a good example. There's the grass, there's the erosion, and that's how quickly it can happen. Oh, my.
So how old is she?
About 6. Yep. Come on, let's go. I learned a lot from a good dog. I really recommend getting a good dog because then you learn how to handle livestock. They control them with their eyes, not with their size.
Any tips for people that are looking to buy a Border Collie, in your opinion? Is there anything you look for if you were going to get a new one? I guess let me back up. If you were to do it again now, let's say you had no Border Collie and you had to get one, what would you do? Would you go get one that was already trained?
Yes, most definitely. You're not smart enough to train a dog.
It's a specialty.
Yes.
I think people, I think it's very underappreciated.
Yes.
And we've been in the same place you are. I got one and I was like, I can do this. No.
Exactly.
There's too many nuances to it.
You know, you look at the price tag, and, for Illinois, Indiana, if you're looking at a good trained dog, you're looking at $2,000-$3,000.
Right.
And you're like, oh my gosh. Well, I ain't going to pay that. Well, how much does a puppy cost? $500. Well, then I'll get a puppy, and I'll train it myself. I'm smart enough. Wrong. Wrong.
Right.
Spend the money and learn from the dog.
Now, do you think if you already had a well-trained one,
it would help?
It would help.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think people don't consider as well, and you know this, is sheep get trained to being worked by a dog.
Oh, shoot, yes.
And so when the dog's learning, if it's learning on livestock that's been trained to work with a dog, it's way easier than getting a brand new dog with sheep that have never dealt with a dog before. Then you've got confusion and
the rodeo is on. There again, you got to get a dog that works good with you. I had a red Border Collie here, and I could not get that thing to work. And I took it to Beth Miller up in Wisconsin, and within 15, 20 minutes, she had that dog doing all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, wait a minute now, what the heck's going on here? She says, it's your voice. My voice is different than your daughter's voice. And she says, you're just, too strong on that dog.
Our Border Collie is the most emotional dog I've ever had. She very much is in tune with your mood, your tone of voice.
Yeah.
She gets her feelings hurt real easy. She takes praise really well, but they're just a very emotional dog. They're very smart.
Yes. That's why I said buy a trained dog.
Right.
You'll learn a lot. It's a teacher.
I personally feel if somebody's wanting to run an operation like yours, it's advantageous for them to find a place close to them to go to and to talk. If someone were interested in our area to come and talk with you and buy breeding stock or any kind of stock, how does that work? Do you have a certain time of the year that you like to sell, or is it pretty much you give you a call and come on out and go from there?
For breeding stock for lambs and stuff, I wean in July, August. That'd be for weaned lambs. I market the lambs in November, December, so that's another time.
Okay.
If you want a bigger type lamb.
We'll have all of your contact information in the description of the video below. If someone wants to contact you, best way to contact you, do you have a preference?
Phone call.
Phone call.
Usually works better. They can text me, but I just as soon talk to somebody instead of doing the texting. After a few texts, that you might as well call me.
Absolutely. Do you have any advice for someone that's looking to buy new stock? Let's say someone doesn't have any sheep at all and they're looking to get into it. What would you advise? What time of the year? What age of animal?
That's a loaded question.
It is. Let's say for your stock specifically, because, you know, the pasture-raised animals is something that people are very interested in now. What are your thoughts on that?
Start small. Plant a post first. Make sure you've got a good perimeter fence. Start small. Realize that you're going to make mistakes. That's just part of life. And, you know, if you've got questions, you can call me. There's all kinds of guys around.
There are.
Look for your state sheep associations and talk to them. I was president of the Illinois Lamb and Wool for quite a few years. We had starter kits and stuff to start people up into sheep. Buy good stock. That's just like a good herding dog, guard dog. Don't, you know, money's money, but you got to spend some good money to get good stuff.
Sure.
You're not going to get into it on the cheap.
Absolutely. Well, we really appreciate you visiting with us today, and we're going to plan on coming back out early this summer when the lambs are hitting the ground to see how things go then.
June, when it's nice and warm and we don't have to have coats on.
That's right. Well, thank you again.
Yes,
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks an awful lot.